It was June 2026, and the briefing room inside Buckingham Palace was unusually quiet. Senior palace officials had gathered not for a state ceremony, not for a royal wedding, not for a diplomatic reception, but for something far more significant. An announcement that would fundamentally alter the relationship between the British monarchy and its most famous building. The keeper of the Privy Purse, James Chalmers, stood before a small group of journalists and delivered the news that would send ripples across the globe. King Charles III and Queen Camilla would never take up residence in Buckingham Palace, even after the completion of its massive £369 million renovation. The decision, Chalmers explained, had been made after careful consideration and was driven by a desire to greatly increase opportunities for public access to the historic building. What made this announcement so extraordinary was not just the decision itself, but what it represented. The first time in nearly 200 years that a British monarch had formally declined to use the iconic 775-room palace as their official London home. To understand why this moment matters so deeply, we have to go back to 1837, when Queen Victoria became the first sovereign to make Buckingham Palace the official royal residence. For generations, the palace has stood as the undisputed heart of the monarchy, the backdrop for royal weddings, balcony appearances, state banquets, and moments of national celebration and mourning that have defined British identity for almost 2 centuries. The building itself is a masterpiece of architecture, a symbol of continuity and tradition that has been recognized around the world as the very embodiment of the crown. Yet King Charles, at the age of 77, and after waiting his entire life to ascend to the throne, has made it clear that he sees the palace not as a home, but as something else entirely: a government headquarters, a ceremonial machine, a national treasure that belongs to the people rather than to any single monarch. Royal sources close to the king have revealed that Charles has always felt uncomfortable within the vast corridors of Buckingham Palace, describing it as impersonal, overwhelming, and fundamentally unsuited to the kind of private family life he values. One senior palace official, speaking on condition of anonymity, told reporters that the king has always regarded Clarence House, the elegant 5-bedroom residence where he has lived since 2003, as his true sanctuary, the only place where he can escape the relentless pressures of royal duty and find a semblance of normalcy. The decision to reject Buckingham Palace, therefore, was never a sudden whim or a reaction to any particular event. It was the culmination of years of personal reflection, practical consideration, and a deep-seated desire to separate the institution of the monarchy from the private life of the man who wears the crown. There is, however, another factor that almost nobody outside the palace walls has discussed publicly, and it is perhaps the most revealing insight into Charles's thinking. The king has long been troubled by the environmental impact of maintaining such an enormous building for such limited personal use. Heating and lighting a 775-room palace for just 2 people has always struck him as wasteful, unsustainable, and fundamentally at odds with his lifelong commitment to environmental causes. This is a man who has spent decades campaigning for sustainability, who has spoken passionately about the need to protect the planet for future generations, and who has now made a decision that aligns his personal values with his public role in a way that few previous monarchs have ever attempted. But there is another layer to this story that has gone largely unreported. The decision to stay at Clarence House also reflects Charles's deep appreciation for architectural history and his desire to live in a space that feels human in scale rather than overwhelming in its grandeur. Clarence House, which was built between 1825 and 1827 for King William IV, has been the home of some of the most significant figures in modern royal history, including the Queen Mother, who lived there for more than 50 years and who was one of the most beloved members of the royal family. The building is not just a residence, it is a repository of family memories, a place where generations of the royal family have lived, loved, and served, and Charles feels a profound connection to that legacy that he simply does not feel at Buckingham Palace. The decision also has significant financial implications that palace officials have been at pains to emphasize. By not living in Buckingham Palace, the king is effectively allowing the building to be open to the public to a far greater extent than has ever been possible before. generating revenue that can help offset the considerable cost of its maintenance. Currently, the palace receives approximately 700,000 visitors per year, but officials believe that number could rise dramatically if the building is fully accessible without the restrictions imposed by royal residents. This is not merely a symbolic gesture, but a practical financial strategy, one that aligns with the king's broader goal of making the monarchy more transparent, more accountable, and less dependent on public funding. Yet for all the practical and financial arguments, there remains something deeply symbolic about this decision, something that has touched a nerve in the national conversation about the role of the monarchy in modern Britain. Buckingham Palace has been the home of the sovereign for nearly 2 centuries, and its association with the crown has been carefully cultivated by successive monarchs as a way of reinforcing the mystique and authority of the institution. By rejecting the palace, Charles is effectively stating that the crown is not defined by its buildings, but by its purpose, a statement that has been met with both praise and criticism in equal measure. Later in this documentary, we will examine the criticisms that have been leveled against the king's decision, the arguments made by those who believe he has risked diminishing the majesty of the monarchy, and the counter-arguments from those who see this as a bold and necessary step toward modernization. But first, we need to understand the deeper factors that shaped this decision, the personal and institutional pressures that led Charles to make a choice that no British monarch has ever made before. As we will discover, this was never just about a building, it was about the future of the monarchy itself. When King Charles III made the decision to reject Buckingham Palace as his official residence, he was not acting alone. Behind the scenes, a complex web of factors was at work, pulling the king in different directions and forcing him to weigh competing priorities that touched on everything from national security and family dynamics to public perception and institutional survival. Perhaps the most critical factor that has received relatively little public attention is the issue of security. Buckingham Palace is notoriously difficult to secure effectively, with its multiple entrances, extensive public areas, and historic layout that was never designed with modern security threats in mind. The cost of providing round-the-clock protection for the sovereign in a building that is also open to the public for large parts of the year would be astronomical, requiring hundreds of security personnel, sophisticated surveillance systems, and constant compromises between accessibility and safety. Clarence House, by contrast, is far more manageable from a security perspective, with its smaller footprint, its walled garden, and its location that allows for more effective control of the surrounding area. The King's security team strongly recommended that he remain at Clarence House, and this recommendation carried significant weight in the final decision. But security was only one piece of the puzzle. There was also the question of family, and the deeply personal dynamics that have shaped Charles's life and reign. The king has already had to contend with more than his fair share of familial tension and public controversy, from the ongoing saga of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, to the scandals surrounding his brother Prince Andrew. Throughout these challenges, Charles has been determined to bring a measure of stability and continuity to the institution, to create a sense of calm and order that has sometimes been lacking in recent years. A move into Buckingham Palace would require the relocation of not only the King and Queen, but also their extensive personal staff, their household possessions, and the myriad of logistical systems that keep their lives running smoothly. The process would take months, would inevitably attract intense media scrutiny, and would disrupt the routines that have become essential to the King's well-being. By staying at Clarence House, Charles is avoiding the kind of disruptive transition that could distract from the serious business of governing and representing the country, and he is signaling that he is content to work from the palace during the day, but return to his own home in the evening, much like any other working professional. There is also the question of how the decision affects other members of the royal family, particularly Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, who are widely seen as the future of the monarchy. William has reportedly expressed views about Buckingham Palace that are strikingly similar to those of his father, and there is strong speculation that he will continue the practice of keeping the palace as a working headquarters rather than a personal home when he becomes king. The Prince and Princess of Wales have made it clear that they prefer the more private and family-oriented surroundings of their home at Adelaide Cottage in Windsor. which offers them the opportunity to raise their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, away from the relentless glare of media attention. This approach to royal life, which emphasizes family privacy and normalcy over public spectacle, has been widely praised by commentators who see it as a welcome departure from the more regimented and formal style of previous generations. However, some critics have questioned whether this trend toward greater privacy risks weakening the monarchy's connection with the public, arguing that the royal family has always derived much of its authority and mystique from its visibility and accessibility. This is a debate that continues to divide royal watchers, with some applauding the king's efforts to modernize the institution, and others warning that he risks making the monarchy feel distant and disconnected from the people it serves. The financial aspects of the decision cannot be overstated, and they have been a central focus of palace briefings. The sovereign grant, the annual funding provided by the government to support the monarchy, is set to fall from £137.9 million to £99.9 million in 2027-28, as the Buckingham Palace renovation ends and the need for ongoing maintenance is reassessed. This reduction in funding is likely to be welcomed by taxpayers, many of whom have expressed concerns about the cost of the monarchy in recent years, and it will help to strengthen the king's reputation as a prudent and responsible steward of public money. But there is an irony here that palace officials have been careful not to emphasize. By choosing not to live in the palace, Charles is effectively reducing the need for certain types of expenditure, but he is also creating new costs associated with maintaining 2 separate royal households, one at Clarence House and one at Buckingham Palace. The net financial effect of the decision remains unclear, and critics have argued that the savings may be more apparent than real. There are also questions about the future of the staff who currently work at Buckingham Palace and whether they will be relocated to Clarence House or face potential redundancies. Palace officials have sought to reassure staff that their roles will be protected, but the uncertainty has created anxiety among some employees. The decision has also raised important questions about the monarchy's other properties, particularly Windsor Castle, which has been the home of the royal family for almost 1,000 years, and which is widely considered to be the Queen's favourite residence. Charles has already made it clear that he intends to maintain Windsor Castle as a major royal residence and ceremonial centre, and he has spent considerable time at the castle since ascending to the throne. There has been some speculation that he might eventually choose to make Windsor Castle his primary residence, thereby transferring the centre of royal life away from London and toward the countryside. However, palace officials have stressed that the king has no immediate plans to relocate from Clarence House, and that London will continue to be the political and ceremonial heart of the monarchy. This brings us to the question of public perception, which has been a constant concern for the king and his advisors. In an era of rising costs and economic uncertainty, the image of a monarch refusing to live in a £369 million palace could be interpreted in different ways. Some will see it as a sign of humility and restraint, a recognition that the monarchy must adapt to the realities of modern life. Others will see it as a rejection of tradition, a sign that the king does not fully embrace the role he has inherited. The palace has been careful to frame the decision in the most positive possible terms, emphasizing the benefits of public access, financial prudence, and the king's personal commitment to sustainability. But there is no escaping the fact that this decision has created a moment of uncertainty and debate that will take time to resolve. As we will see in the next section, the reaction to the announcement has been deeply divided, with passionate arguments on both sides about what this means for the future of the monarchy. Within hours of the announcement, the reaction began to flood in from every corner of the country, and it quickly became clear that King Charles's decision to reject Buckingham Palace had divided public opinion in ways that few palace officials had anticipated. Supporters of the king argued that he had demonstrated remarkable foresight and courage, breaking with a tradition that no longer served the monarchy or the nation. They pointed to the increased public access, the financial savings, and the environmental benefits as evidence that Charles was a modern and forward-thinking monarch who was not afraid to challenge outdated assumptions. Critics, however, were far less generous. They argued that the decision risked diminishing the majesty and authority of the crown, stripping the monarchy of the mystery and grandeur that had long been its source of authority and influence. Some commentators went further, suggesting that Charles's reluctance to embrace the full trappings of kingship reflected a deeper uncertainty about his role, a sense that he did not fully feel entitled to the position he had inherited. The Daily Telegraph, in a strongly worded editorial, warned that the king was allowing personal preference to override institutional responsibility, while The Guardian, in a more measured tone, suggested that the decision was a welcome step toward a more transparent and accountable monarchy. The split in public opinion was reflected in social media, where the hashtag King Charles trended for 3 days straight, with users posting everything from passionate defenses to biting criticisms of the decision. One of the most interesting aspects of the reaction was the way it exposed a deeper tension within the monarchy itself, a tension between tradition and modernization, between the institution and the individual, between the past and the future. Some royal watchers argued that Charles was simply continuing the work of modernization that his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had begun, pointing out that the late Queen had also embraced change during her record-breaking reign. Others argued that the king was going too far, too fast, and that he risked alienating the traditional supporters who had been the bedrock of the monarchy for generations. This division was not confined to the public or to the media. It was also evident within the palace itself, where staff members were reportedly divided over the decision. Some officials were enthusiastic supporters of the king's vision, seeing it as an opportunity to create a more dynamic and accessible monarchy. Others were concerned about the practical implications, the logistical challenges, and the potential for the decision to create unintended consequences that would be difficult to reverse. One of the most significant criticisms came from constitutional experts, who argued that the king's decision could have implications for the monarchy's constitutional role. Buckingham Palace has not just been a home, it has been a symbol of the monarchy's continuity and stability, a visible reminder of the crown's place at the heart of national life. By distancing himself from that symbol, critics argued, Charles could be undermining the monarchy's constitutional authority, making it easier for those who wanted to abolish the institution to argue that it was no longer relevant to modern Britain. These arguments were countered by other constitutional experts, who pointed out that the monarchy's authority derives not from its buildings, but from the law, from Parliament, and from the consent of the people. They argued that Buckingham Palace was simply a building, and that the monarchy's survival depended not on its symbols, but on its substance. There were also concerns about the impact on tourism, with some commentators warning that the decision could reduce the appeal of Buckingham Palace as a tourist attraction. However, palace officials have argued that increased public access will actually boost tourism, attracting more visitors from around the world who want to experience the palace in a more immersive and engaging way. They pointed to the success of similar initiatives at other royal palaces, including the Tower of London and Hampton Court, which have seen significant increases in visitor numbers after being opened more fully to the public. Perhaps the most surprising reaction came from international media, which focused on the symbolic significance of the decision. The New York Times described it as a generational shift in the British monarchy, while the BBC focused on the financial implications, noting that the decision was part of a broader effort by Charles to reduce the costs of the crown. The international coverage was, for the most part, respectful and measured, but it also reflected a global fascination with the British monarchy and its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. One of the key questions that remained unresolved was whether Prince William would follow his father's example when he became king. Sources close to the Prince of Wales have suggested that he shares his father's view that Buckingham Palace is not a suitable family home, and that he would prefer to continue the practice of using it as a working headquarters rather than a personal residence. However, there is also speculation that William may eventually choose to move into the palace, recognizing its symbolic importance and the need to maintain the monarchy's connection with its most famous building. This uncertainty has created a degree of speculation that has added to the sense of drama surrounding the decision. There is also the question of how the decision will affect the relationship between the monarchy and the government, particularly in the context of the sovereign grant and the ongoing debate about royal finances. Some members of Parliament, have called for a review of the funding arrangements, arguing that the King's decision should be accompanied by a reassessment of the support provided to the monarchy. Palace officials have sought to reassure the government that the decision will not lead to any significant changes in the funding structure, and that the King remains committed to maintaining the monarchy's operational capability. However, the debate about royal finances is unlikely to go away, and it is likely to be a recurring theme in discussions about the monarchy's future. As we move toward the final section of our story, we will explore what this decision means for the future of the monarchy, and whether it will ultimately be seen as a moment of strength or weakness in the long history of the British Crown. One thing is certain: this is a story that will continue to unfold for years to come, and its full implications may not be clear until long after the current debate has faded from the headlines. What the palace did not anticipate, and what has become increasingly clear in the weeks following the announcement, is that the King's decision to reject Buckingham Palace has created a cascade of unexpected consequences that are reshaping the monarchy in ways that go far beyond the question of where the sovereign sleeps at night. The decision has reopened long-standing debates about the monarchy's role in British society, about the relationship between the crown and the people, and about the very meaning of tradition in an era of rapid change. One of the most immediate consequences has been a renewed focus on the other royal residences, particularly Windsor Castle, which has emerged as an even more significant centre of royal life than before. The King has spent increasing amounts of time at Windsor, and there is growing speculation that he may eventually choose to make the castle his primary residence, thereby shifting the centre of gravity of the monarchy away from London and toward the countryside. This would be a dramatic change, one that would have profound implications for the monarchy's relationship with the capital and with the nation as a whole. Windsor Castle is not just a royal residence, it is a fortress, a symbol of the monarchy's ancient roots and its enduring connection to British history. For Charles to choose Windsor over Buckingham Palace would be a powerful statement about the kind of monarchy he wants to lead, one that is rooted in tradition but not trapped by it, one that values substance over spectacle and service over self-display. Another unexpected consequence of the decision has been the reaction from the Commonwealth, where the British monarch also serves as head of state. Some Commonwealth leaders have expressed concern that the decision reflects a broader trend toward a more insular and less internationally focused monarchy, one that is increasingly disconnected from its global role. Palace officials have been quick to reassure Commonwealth leaders that the King remains committed to his role as head of the Commonwealth, and that the decision to stay at Clarence House does not reflect any diminution of that commitment. However, the concerns that have been raised are a reminder that the monarchy's international role is an important part of its identity, and that any decision that appears to prioritize domestic concerns over global responsibilities is likely to attract scrutiny and criticism. The decision has also had implications for the monarchy's relationship with the media, which has been intensely interested in every detail of the story. The press has been fascinated by the personal dimensions of the story, the family dynamics, and the psychological factors that led Charles to make such an unprecedented decision. There have been numerous profiles of the King, exploring his character, his values, and his motivations, and many of these have been surprisingly positive, presenting him as a thoughtful and principled man who is not afraid to make difficult decisions. However, there have also been critical pieces, particularly in the tabloid press, which have portrayed the decision as an act of weakness or indecision. The palace has been careful to manage the media coverage, offering carefully controlled briefings and access to selected journalists, but the sheer volume of coverage has made it difficult to control the narrative. One of the most interesting developments has been the way the decision has affected public opinion on the monarchy as a whole. Polls conducted in the aftermath of the announcement have shown mixed results, with some surveys indicating that the decision has actually increased public support for the monarchy, while others have suggested that it has eroded confidence in the institution. What is clear is that the debate has engaged the public in ways that few royal stories have done in recent years, generating a level of interest and discussion that has been remarkable. The monarchy has always been a subject of fascination for the British public, but this story has touched something deeper, prompting people to think about what the monarchy means to them and what they want it to be. There is also the question of how the decision will be remembered by history. Will it be seen as a moment of strength, a bold and necessary step toward modernization, or will it be seen as a moment of weakness, a sign that the monarchy is losing its confidence and its sense of purpose? The answer to that question will depend not just on the decision itself, but on what happens next, and on whether Charles can build on this moment to create a monarchy that is stronger, more relevant, and more effective than ever before. Some commentators have drawn parallels with other moments in royal history, including the abdication crisis of 1936, when King Edward V was forced to choose between his personal desires and his institutional responsibilities. The comparison is not exact, but it reflects the sense that this is a moment of choice, a moment when the monarchy's direction is being shaped by the decisions of a single individual. For Charles, the stakes could not be higher. He is not just deciding where to live, he is deciding what kind of monarchy he wants to lead and what legacy he wants to leave. There are those who believe that he has made the right choice, that he has demonstrated a rare combination of personal conviction and institutional responsibility. There are others who believe that he has made a grave error, one that will have consequences for generations to come. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, and it may take years, or even decades, before the full implications of this decision are clear. What we can say with certainty is that the monarchy is changing, and that the changes are coming faster and more dramatically than anyone could have predicted. The era of the monarch living in Buckingham Palace has come to an end, and with it, a chapter in British history that lasted nearly 2 centuries. The future is uncertain, but it is also full of potential, and the king has made it clear that he is determined to shape that future with courage, conviction, and a steadfast commitment to the values that have guided his life. In the end, the decision to stay at Clarence House is not just about a building, it is about the kind of monarchy that Charles wants to lead, and the kind of country that he wants to serve. It is a decision that will be debated and analysed for years to come, and one that will define his reign in ways that are only just beginning to become clear. As we look to the future, one thing is certain: the monarchy will never be quite the same again, and that is exactly what Charles intended.